Hello everyone, welcome back to Infinity Stones and Dragon Bones. This is a podcast about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and I am your host, Derek McDuff. Today we're going to be discussing the recently released miniseries Wonder Man, and joining me to do so is someone who's been on a few of my podcasts. I've been on his podcast, A Minute of Thieves, but for you guys, might be most interested in his podcast, Real Comic Heroes, and that would be Travis Bowe. How's it going, Travis?
Going well. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Glad to have you here talking about superheroes, because, you know, we both have superhero kind of adjacent podcasts about movies, but we've had plenty of crossovers, but not crossing over this segment, so I'm glad to finally, scratch that itch here.
Yeah, me too. And it was totally not planned that I wore my Mad Titan shirt that has the Infinity Gauntlet on it, and as soon as you said Infinity Stones and Dragon Bones, I thought, oh shit, I didn't plan to wear the perfect shirt, so.
Yeah, very, very appropriate, you know. Sometimes that works out. But yeah, before we get too much into, this piece of the MCU in Wonderland, what do you want to let the people know about yourself and about Real Comic Heroes?
So it is a show where we've been going like 10 years, and we made a list of comic book movies and are going through that list in release order. So we started with Superman and the Mole Men from 1951. And let's see, as of this recording, we've made it to 2001. We've talked about recently Jet Li's The One, one of the Lara Croft Tomb Raider. Let's see, we've got some good stuff coming up. Like 2002, we've got Spider-Man and Blade 2 and stuff like that. So
nice. So you got a little ways before you get to the MCU.
Oh yes. Yeah, with as slow as we go, that's years away. So,
but yeah. So for anybody listening, like I said, we over here just cover MCU stuff when it comes out, and Wonder Man. It's kind of one that I know I didn't personally have a lot of history with this character. I didn't know too much about him. I remember seeing him on the old Avengers show from like 2012 or the early 2000s, whenever that was. Not a character I was infinitely familiar with. But yeah, this miniseries is part of the Marvel Spotlight, as they call it, which are just kind of things that don't really matter or connect too much to, the larger overarching MCU plot.
Real loose affiliation with the MCU. Yeah, you're not.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you'll have things come, like references come in, things that, matter. It's almost like more like, what Marvel TV used to be, where it's like, all right, well, here's Daredevil off over here, and he might mention, something that happens, but he's not going to meet the Hulk or anything.
They'd say, like the green guy or the one with long hair, wreck New York, or
Exactly. So it's kind of, some of these are kind of in that same vein, but you will still get things from that wider world affect the more ground level things that are happening here. Of course, we've got Trevor Slattery, who has a long history of appearing in MCU, or at least a pretty good history of appearing
13
in MCU
years
stuff. Yeah,
exactly.
That's true. But yeah, this was this miniseries created by Destin Daniel Cretton, who of course did Shang Chi. So he has some history with Slattery, and Andrew Guest. And Cretton, of course, is going to be doing this year's upcoming Spider-Man film. Then it stars Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, along with returning star or co-star as the aforementioned Slattery, Ben Kingley, along with other actors. But this one, it's kind of more grounded, more almost like if Marvel decided to make the studio or something like that.
I keep hearing,
yeah, with the celebrity cameos and all the industry references and stuff. But I wanted to get your overall thoughts on the show and kind of your history with Wonder Man as a character.
Okay. history is real brief. Like you, I've seen the character pop up here and there. I've never read any of Wonder Man's like longer running, books like West Coast Avengers. I know he's a big part of. I've read his origin, story. I think it's Avengers 50. I think that could be wrong, but I know a little bit about the character. He's one of those that just has kind of vague, like I remember the word ionic energy was always tied to his
Mm.
character. He'd release ionic energy blasts or whatever. So just vague, like, energy blasts kind of thing. Um, but then I also knew he was a movie star, and that was kind of the big, the one thing everyone knows about Simon Williams. And let's see. Yeah, don't really have a lot of history with the character. But as far as like overall on this show, I went into it with zero expectations because the last couple of years I've just kind of been checked out of like I don't watch trailers for anything, so my anticipation level for everything has gone way down. And I'm kind of glad with this one because, like I said, went in with zero expectations and I instantly fell in love with it. I've watched the show fully through twice now. I could have made it through another viewing today, but I decided not to. But I mean, it's such a quick watch. I mean, the episodes are 30 minutes. You can blast right through them. But yeah, so I've watched the series now twice, and yeah, just love the show. Really like the character. I love the pairing of Simon and Trevor, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about it. So
Yeah, yeah. I was also very impressed with the show. I think what a lot of people are saying is this one kind of just came out of nowhere. I know that there was some promotion stuff, but wasn't heavily promoted. When it came to this, and all the episodes just being dropped at once, which is nice. Because I get to binge it and don't have to wait
yeah,
week to week. And like you said, they are just 30 minutes, which is very nice. So it's only ends up being a little bit over 4 hours or something like that with the 8 episodes, and you can kind of just get through it. But I feel like it doesn't. Whenever a show does that, it doesn't kind of keep things in the cultural zeitgeist. That water
sure.
cooler talk week to week kind of disappears. So I'm worried that
Yeah,
this
no
one
one's going to
might
be
just
talking
blow
about
over.
this in 3 weeks, or maybe it might go a month, but you know,
Yeah.
but
So
everything I'm hearing about other people saying that, I've seen a lot of headlines, best Marvel show yet or stuff like that. So it's getting good, word of mouth. I've One person in my friend group was like, I don't get it, you guys. Like in our group chat, everyone was going on about it, and one person was like, yeah, I just don't get all the love. He went in, I think, expecting a, you know, tights and fights, superhero show, and that's not what this is. So,
yeah, not at all.
you know,
Which I was I thought that was really cool. Yeah, like you say, it's not it's they dropped it all once, and it seems like maybe Marvel might have mishandled this because it seems very, very beloved. It seems like they have a
yeah,
real hit on their hands, and they could have really drawn this thing out rather than just kind of dropping it. But either way,
yeah,
it's great. And one of the reasons that maybe they decided to not release it week to week is because not a lot of, as you alluded to, not a lot of superhero stuff happens. It's very meta.
yeah,
It's about like what is the movie slash superhero movie look like in a world where superheroes exist, which is, I think, a very
yeah,
interesting take. I mentioned that it's very much like the studio, where it's about all this kind of a Hollywood insider, LA, local type stuff. But yeah, like you get a little bit of superhero stuff, especially kind of towards the back end. But it's mostly just about a regular guy who, instead of wanting to be a superhero, wanting to be like Wonder Man flying around, he would rather be an actor. He wants to play Wonder Man in this, superhero
yeah.
within a superhero universe. So I thought that was really cool. What were your thoughts about just kind of the meta stuff, the way this is all presented?
Yeah, I there was one part where I thought was a little weird where, they go to the birthday party and some of Simon's cousins are talking about like Captain America, and I was just like, why, they don't know that Simon has powers, so why would, and he's an actor in LA. He's not in New York where he's not running into superheroes. It was an odd question for like to just randomly ask some, your actor cousin. That felt a little shoehorned in just so we can mention Captain America.
Hmm.
But I guess in this world, people would have that conversation, I guess, but it just felt, out of nowhere and kind of forced,
It felt to me almost like it's
Um,
like, well, people are going to ask him, like, when they find out he's famous, somebody asks him, I think, do you know Dua Lipa? And I think that's the way,
yeah,
like, this
that,
universe works, is like, do you know Dua
yeah,
Lipa? Do you know Captain America? It's just like one of those things, like, all famous people know
yeah.
each other.
But again, yeah, it was just, yeah, I guess it falls into that. But, he's an actor who's had moderate success. Why would he know Captain America? Um, but no, yeah, I really, really like this show. My notes are kind of scattered. I basically went episode by episode. So,
Yeah, I mean, if you want
um,
to break it
but
down, you can talk about, like, some of the highlights for some of the episodes for you.
yeah, kind of instantly we see what it opens on some old footage of, the original Wonder Man movie from the 1980s, and instantly, seeing the Vasquez rocks, which are a
Right,
big
yeah. That's
part
such a
of
movie thing, you know?
yeah, and like I've been rewatching all of Star Trek the original series,
Mm.
so I see those rocks, that those rock formations in the episodes I'm watching. So it was really cool. Like it just set the perfect tone for what they were going for in this supposed, 19. I felt like because of the age of the character and the time that this was coming out, that the movie that they were watching looked like they were going for a 60s series. But then they say everywhere it's said that it came out in the 80s. So that I felt was like, this doesn't look like an 80s movie, but that's, not a big
For me,
deal.
it almost reminded me of, like,
Um,
Power Rangers, you know?
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I did want to mention like, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. Like I liked him as Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen in the
Hmm.
Watchmen series, and then as Black Manta in Aquaman. And like, yeah, he is just a guy who, when he's on screen, I gravitated towards, like, I'm just really compelled by this guy. Every you know frame that he's in, like there's something about him that's really interesting to watch. I've not
He's
seen
incredible.
the Matrix movie that he's in, so I don't
He's
know
he's
him
he's
from.
very good in that, I will say. He's really good
Okay,
as, like, it's like one of those things. It's like,
yeah,
how can you replace Lawrence Fishburne? And, like, you're like, he kind of nails it though.
okay. And then on the other side, you got Ben Kingsley, and I think it's really incredible that they took a character that Shane Black created, like I said, 13 years ago. And I don't know if Shane Black, I don't know who created that character, but basically he's from a Shane Black Iron Man 3 13 years ago.
Basically,
And
as a
they
joke.
basically, as a punchline, yeah, they twisted the whole Mandarin thing, and that was really divisive. People
Hmm.
liked it or didn't like it. They didn't like that. What's his name? Guy Pearce was the Mandarin. I think more
Right.
people liked the Ben Kingsley twist. I do. For the most part, yeah, I thought that was a fun take on the Mandarin. But yeah, so to use this guy as basically a punchline, and then years later, someone said, let's put him in Shang Chi, and that makes sense. You're dealing with the real Mandarin, so I like
Hmm.
that they incorporated him there. And
And it
then,
was, yeah, Destin
you know,
David Cretton who
yeah,
directed this movie. We put him in, and, like,
yeah,
because he does appear in, like, I think it was the last ever Marvel one shot where they, like,
right,
basically, like,
yeah,
kind of like break him out of prison to be like, maybe we'll do something with the real Mandarin later.
yeah,
They left it
yeah,
very open ended, and then when he shows back
right,
up, you see him slowly grow from a, like we mentioned, kind
yeah,
of joke, one off kind of like twist character into a real developed, interesting person, especially by the end of
yeah.
this.
Oh man, I flat out love Trevor Slattery. I love this character. I love what happens with him in this show. But like that whole like his journey reminds me of like whoever the genius was that decided, in Iron Man, let's make Jarvis an AI, and then a couple years later, like, oh, what if Jarvis, the AI, becomes the Vision?
Mm,
And that it's that kind of like decision making slash just happy coincidence that we went this route because they didn't plan that from the start, and
right.
that you get Paul Bettany who can physically play the actor, um character, and like just a weird coincidence, like, because I think that was a genius move, like, with creating a character and then using him a different way later like they've done here. It's also interesting that Vision is like the brain patterns of Simon Williams. Wonder Man are who in the comics, the brain patterns of Simon Williams are who the Vision is based off of. So it's just a
Oh,
weird,
interesting.
like,
Did not know that.
and they're not going to do that in this show. There's no
Right.
way
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
now connect those two characters, but it's just interesting that you have, two properties that are tangentially connected, that they have been, you know, transformed from their initial sort of, where they were in yeah. Um
Yeah. No.
but yeah.
And I love the take on Simon Williams, rather than being
Yeah.
the hero, like being the actor playing him. And me being, somebody who lives in Southern California. I've lived in LA my whole life.
Mm.
I studied theater for a couple years, went to a school where and knew a lot of actors, and I still do.
Okay.
And so it feels like it really nails that culture. Simon
Okay.
feels like a guy that I went to college with. Like I'm like, I knew
Okay.
this guy. I knew Trevor Slattery's too. Like a lot of it ended up becoming like like the guys who are
Yeah.
classically trained and like, let me tell you about Shakespeare, and they don't always have a lot of success. Those guys often like become theater teachers at like Cal State Fullerton or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I knew both of these characters very well, or these kinds of
Okay.
characters. And I think the funny thing too is like I'm watching this and it's that initial scene where it's like, oh, he's going to be like a day player on set on this big TV show.
Yeah.
And in that scene, what it made it work on an even more meta level for me specifically is that one of the day players in that scene is a guy that I know. The guy who's like,
Oh.
oh, we can adjust the moonbeam. That's
Okay.
my friend Earl. So I had a moment where I
Okay.
like paused it and I was like, yeah, it really feels like, okay, they're nailing it. They are getting
Yeah, yeah.
the vibe of like what it feels like to be a day player, and so that worked for me
Yeah.
on an even more meta level.
I love that scene sets up that Simon cannot help but get in his own way. He is nitpicking
Yeah.
this character that I couldn't get the sense of, has this character, is this his one scene in this show, or has he been on the show for several episodes, but now this is his final, they're about to kill him off or whatever. So I couldn't get that sense of, has he been working on American Horror Story, or is this his one and only day on it and they're just
I
writing
got
him
the
out?
vibe that it was just. I think it was just his only day. Like that was my
Okay.
takeaway from it. Because like he's
Okay.
getting kind of like he doesn't know. I forget her name. Ashley Green, I think from Twilight.
Yeah.
She has that cameo.
Yeah.
Like, and he seems to be kind of meeting everyone for the first time, and it
Okay.
seems to be his only day on set.
Okay. So yeah, it's I like that we instantly get a sense of who this guy is because he is just going through his script and like, should I be looking at this book? And I think I should be looking at this book because why would I have this book? And it's like, maybe we should go to the writer and find out what they think. It's like, come on, man, just you are sabotaging
Yeah.
yourself, and I like that, we find out quickly that's who he is. He is so concerned with, getting everything right and doing everything the right way. Um, but he's also, oh, where was I going with that? No, I lost it. Um,
Well,
but
yeah,
yeah,
I'll just say, I love that, yeah, like the characterization you get from this scene, you really
Yeah,
learn
yeah.
who he is, because, he's the main character, and then, you have, it's
Yeah.
almost a two-handed, not quite there, but, with Trevor,
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
really the only other big character on the show. We've seen Trevor before. We know his vibe. And even if we don't, we get the bits and pieces of him being like somebody who played a terrorist. These two people are relatively unlikable for very different reasons, but over the course of the series, we see that they bring out the best in each other. Like Simon has that line in episode 6 or 7 or something where he says, people don't like me, they like us. And I think that, their collaboration, them coming together, them truly bringing out the best in each other, leading to that really great finale in that kind of like last sequence in the last episode, I think is fantastic. And all the cool stuff about the meta stuff, the LA, how smart and clever it is, what it has to say about, superhero movies in general, that's all good and well, but the real heart of the story is just this dynamic.
Yeah, and you touched on what I was forgetting was, this is a character who is kind of unlikable. He breaks up with his girlfriend in the first episode because, and she even says like, or maybe he says, I know I can be self-centered. And she's like, yeah, yes, you are. You are self-centered. I think, and we get that. And
because I think she kind of leaves him. She's just like, but it's because he's like so self-centered. And we find out later, like she figured out he had superpowers, but he never even opened up to her,
Yeah. And
shout out to Olivia Thirlby, by the way, who's great in that small bit.
Yeah. Not. I wish there was a little bit more of her in this. She was really good. I love how the first episode, ends with them having just Simon and Trevor meet cute. We get they spoil Midnight Cowboy for everyone, and then go on kind of follow each other, or have that first kind of interaction or whatever, which is just it's really fun.
I just their whole dynamic, the way it builds is just fantastic. And then I don't know, you want to get into episode, we can talk about episode 2. We can kind of break it down episode by episode.
I have real brief notes on each episode. We don't have to break it all down. I like that episode 2, the self-tape, is it's a quest episode. They've Simon weasels his way in to this audition for Wonder Man. He gets in, and then they're like, okay, there was something there, so we need your self tape. So now he's got to record himself, but his apartment's wrecked, and he needs Trevor's help. And the self tape studio is, the lady there is unprofessional. So then they go. They try going to Trevor's, and his room, his neighbors are too loud, and then Trevor's like, "Oh, I have an idea," and then we end up at Joey Pants' house,
right?
Joe Pantoliano. It is so it's a fun like, oh yeah, we're out in LA, like we're gonna run into celebrity guest star of the week, but that has a great payoff. We find out about Trevor's, sort of history and the show. Now, in my friend chat group, they were talking about, they name dropped some shows that Trevor had supposedly been in. And from what I gathered, like some of that lines up with Ben Kingsley's.
Okay, interesting. I was going to check in on that.
I haven't verified that, but I wonder, was Joey Pants in a show about, what was it, Southern Hospital or something, I think is what they kept calling it, or something like that.
Right.
I didn't go to look and see, like, was that a real show or was that made up? But
I love when he showed up, right? Because I need to check in on that. But I loved seeing him show up. I thought that was great. Because I think he gets referenced by him in like an earlier thing. I might be wrong on that, like an earlier MCU thing. I think Slattery mentions him at some point. But I might be wrong. I'd have to double check.
Yeah.
Right. Just kind of a nice payoff. But I love the the kind of quick references, the meta stuff. They mentioned the famous steak scene in The Matrix, and they kind of throw some shade on Baby's Day Out. I thought that was all really good, and it really gives you the first scene where you start to like Simon, where he stands up to Joey Pants, where Joey Pants is just being kind of a dick for no reason. and like this is his dream. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, here's my end. So many actors are like
Mhm.
starfuckers like that, where they're like, oh, I've got to like meet this
Yeah.
like guy, and he can get me to that next stage. And he's like, this could be detrimental to my career, but I'm going to
Right.
stand up for my friend here. And you really
Mhm.
are like, okay, I'm kind of down with Simon right now. He's been
Yeah.
very aggravating, very prickly, very hard to get along with, but he has his morals, and he's standing up for his friend.
Yeah. Yeah. When he's like, you know what, Joey Pants?
He's
That
like,
is
Baby's Day
nice.
Out sucked.
Yeah. And Trevor's like, I'm in. There was a really nice something that Ben Kingsley as Trevor. When we at the start of this episode, I think we have a little flashback of Trevor, like kind of first arriving back in the States after the Shang Chi adventure. And the
Right.
FBI immediately tackles him, and like he just instantly says, "I'm not resisting." He has
Yeah.
this way about him. He's so meek, and that it reminded me, like in the first episode when he uh at what point, maybe it's in this episode, after he's arrested, he talks to the recurring agent, and he says, like, option one, you go back to jail. Option two, you do some. Option two, please. Just that way of, like, it to kind of, it's something that we get a little bit of in
Yeah, just
Iron
doesn't
Man
even.
3,
He's
where
just like,
it's
nope,
like
no, yeah,
he puts up no fight. There is no fight in this guy, and I love that he is so. In some characters, it would come across as weaselly, but he's not trying to get over on anybody. He just doesn't want to be hurt, and he doesn't want to, he wants as little discomfort as possible. Yeah, I just really, really
yeah,
like this
absolutely.
character.
Yeah, no, he's great, and I love that you bring up him like getting back to the country and immediately getting tackled, and that
Yeah,
gives us the whole angle on the Department of Damage Control, who have been like
yeah,
kind of popping up in stuff over the court, like
hmm,
in the background silently in a lot of Marvel properties
yeah,
over the years. And it took me a second to realize, but I was like, wait a minute, the guy, the agent, his handler, whatever, the one who's trying to like make this big
yeah,
bust, he's shown up in a number of Marvel properties. He's the guy who has that whole, he like arrests Peter Parker,
yep,
in Far From
yep,
Home or No Way Home, when he's just like, hey, and he also shows up in Miss
yeah.
Marvel. So like
Okay,
he's just kind
yeah,
of this recurring weasel. Oh, and it feels
yeah.
like the Department of Damage Control in general is a pretty good representation for a lot of stuff that's happening right now in the real world, where it's like, oh yeah,
Oh,
there's this
yeah,
agency that's out there kidnapping people, and like at the end where he's just like, all right,
right.
well they just, there's no due process afforded to
Yeah,
Slattery when he gets arrested. They're just like, oh yeah, he said he was the Mandarin, and there's even that line of like, well, it's not the one we wanted, but a body's a body. They're just trying to get as
yeah,
many
yeah,
arrests as possible. And I was like, okay, this is kind of taking me into the real
yeah.
world a little bit right now.
Hmm.
So yeah, glad
Oh
we had that
man.
whole that angle. I thought that was
Yeah.
it was an interesting touch that has become even more relevant probably than since than when it was shot and written.
Oh man, for sure.
But yeah,
Um,
yeah, no, yeah, keep going.
I was gonna jump into the next episode,
Yeah,
Pacoima, where Simon has to go out to his family's house in Pacoima, and you probably know where that is. I don't really have that's not. I've heard the name, but I don't have a frame of reference. Is that like, you know, the Shelbyville of is
I mean,
is it
it's
the
yeah, it's I think it's kind of like, I mean, yeah, it's not even super, like, I think it's maybe like Bakersfield out that way, but I'm not even sure. It's not,
okay,
yeah, it's not something I know. It's not a
okay,
destination of any kind, I think.
okay, yeah, okay. His mother is so lovely, and his brother's a dick,
Hmm.
and as I watched the show, I kept thinking, isn't I kept thinking, like, I know there's a Marvel character who has a brother who's a villain called the Grim Reaper. And I kind of kept thinking, like, is that Eric Williams? Is that, the brother of Wonder Man? I finally looked it up. I was like, who is
Okay.
Grim Reaper in Marvel? And this is, that is who it is Eric Williams is that villain, but as the show went
Oh,
on, I was like, there's no way they're doing, you know, his brother as like a true
yeah.
villain character. So I'm pretty sure we're never gonna see Eric Williams as the Grim Reaper, but it would have been kind of a funny like if that was Simon's nickname for him, or just some hint at like because they don't get along. So I do
Right.
like
Some
that they
little.
are you know uh antagonizing towards each other, but
Mhm.
a little you know nickname of the Grim Reaper might have been fun, but
Yeah, no, I really like their
yeah.
dynamic, and how he's just so kind of like judgmental and like bringing
Hmm.
out like a lot of the times the worst in his brother case just and that's something that I feel like they really nail it where people will look down on people who work in the arts quite frequently, especially like some members of the
Yeah.
family who don't always get it's like, oh yeah, it's like he's just an actor, he doesn't get it, like blah blah blah,
Hmm.
and the way he like looks down on him, and then to have that kind of very nice reveal later on when he finds out like, oh, my brother got interviewed by this kind of like killer like reporter,
Yeah.
and he's like, oh my gosh, what did he say? Did he like reveal anything about me having superpowers? Like, and then you find out, no, like, no, he just had lovely things to say, and he's so proud of him, and he kind of like you find out that like, oh, Simon's like, oh no, he's proud of me. Like he finally gets it. He sees like now that I've had some success, because he's always punching down. He's like, yeah, like working on American Horror Story. Who gives a shit, But like he's like, oh, like you went and saw Wonder Man. Like you're being Wonder Man. He finally gets it, and it's not a scene that those actors ever share or experience, but it's such a
Right.
nice moment. It's such a good reveal.
There was such a like heartbreaking moment when Trevor's talking to the mother, and she reveals that at one point Simon said that he loved her and thank you for loving me, and she talked about how she knew he was alone but never knew how lonely he was, and
Mm.
it was and had no friends, and it was just like that one hit real hard. um so that was such a touching moment.
Yeah, her whole thing was just like so nice and lovely, and this his whole thing about his dad, being the reason he loved Wonder Man, and his dad having passed away. You get
Yeah.
those glimpses back into his past, and she does feel like when you were a kid, you would go to a friend's house, you would meet the parents who were first generation or something like that, and it's just like
Yeah.
they really capture that vibe well, I think.
In what episode do we get the flashback scene where we go back and experience Simon and his dad, skipping school to go to the movies?
Ooh, that is like one of the later ones. I want to say. I want to say that's like
Okay.
maybe the second last episode, if
Oh, okay.
I'm
Okay.
correct. But yeah, it's because we
Okay.
see some stuff like we see them watching the movie right at the
Yeah.
opening, but
Yeah.
you see the whole skipping school thing happen. Um, I think it is that second last episode,
Okay.
or
Okay.
yeah, because that's that episode ends with the explosion, right? The him exploding
Yeah.
on Man, and then just kind of, so I think that is kind of setting up that arc. But I will say
Gotcha.
too,
Yeah.
just kind of to go on a tangent, I love the kind of metaphor for his powers, right? Him dealing with these like anger issues with this explosive temper, and that becoming like literal explosions, something that he needs to control, and just kind of
Yeah.
he's just stifling it, and he knows that if this gets out, then he won't have a career,
Yeah.
because of something we find out in a later episode. and,
Yeah.
and then I love by the end of it, rather than just suppressing, he has learned to master it. He has learned to
Right.
control it. And I think that's such a good metaphor with dealing with these emotional issues. Instead of just burying it down and just eventually just like
Mm.
letting it all out, exploding, it's something that you can learn to control, and like have it be like these feelings you're feeling, deal with them in a healthy way. So
Yeah.
I really thought that was a cool way to just have a superpower be a metaphor for real life, mental struggles, for lack of a better word.
Sure. Yeah. I definitely see that now. Now that you kind of lay it out like that, I didn't pick up on that, but yeah, that's really really interesting, especially, you know, as he becomes more confident, yeah, he can
Mhm.
control his powers. I do like that.
Yeah, so I thought that was really well done.
Yeah. Um, that episode 4, Doorman, is a lot of fun.
Yeah, I did want to
No.
do want to talk about this a
Oh,
little bit because yeah, I love episode 4. It's
okay.
I love whenever a series kind of does this, right? Where they're like, we're
Sure.
just gonna do episode that is very different from anything else, and I think that's why the advantages of making this as like a mini series rather than
Hmm.
making it as movies, because obviously you can never do this in a movie. You couldn't have just 30
Right.
minutes of the movie just be in a completely different thing. But because of the format and language of TV, you can kind of do this and you can get away with it. It can be just, okay, it's just one episode out of the 7. So now we're exploring this different concept. It's done in black and white to let you kind of know, like, hey, this is something else. And you don't really know why you're seeing any of this
Right.
until the end. Like, there is a brief mention of Doorman earlier,
Yeah.
but it is such an interesting kind of tragic tale. And it
Hmm.
also, it does that same studio thing again, where like Josh Gad is like a huge part of it. You get Emilio Estevez, and I think just Josh Gad, really kind of like clowning on himself, like he's being a very good
Yes.
sport, saying he's not a good actor. He does like that Frozen song at the club, and then
Yeah.
spoiler, I mean, if you want to listen to this is all spoilers, but like Josh Gad being canonically dead in the MCU is one of the funniest things
Oh
that I think
God,
has happened in
that
any
is
season in a
really
long time.
good. Really
It's so
good.
good. But yeah, what were your
I
thoughts
I
on this
love
episode?
I love yeah, no, I feel the same way, and I love the fact that, like, I've already seen somewhere online, like, Josh Gad missing, a poster, like, someone has created, missing posters for Josh Gad, and I like the idea that that's going to possibly become a recurring thing in the MCU.
Yeah.
There are two things that, like, by having a Doorman episode, I thought they were doing two things. I thought they were going to set him up as a villain, someone for Wonder
Mm.
Man to fight at the end of it, and then possibly a different thing that I'll touch on when we get to the talking about the last episode. But it was a fun tangent thing, um, to that they could do with a Z-list Marvel character.
Yes.
This
Yes.
guy was in the Great Lakes Avengers, like a real, like, group of mystery men type, just kind of losers.
Mm.
I think Squirrel Girl got her start in the Great Lakes Avengers,
Right.
if
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
not mistaken. So yeah, it was just fun to, like, take a character that nobody was thinking about, and yeah, just pop them in here, and just so they can set up that they have this doorman clause that, Hollywood studios don't want you on set if you're superpowered. So yeah,
Yeah.
just a fun way to do it. And yeah, like you said, Josh Gad is used perfectly. That'll be a fun running joke, I think.
Yeah. It'd be good to see. Yeah, when that pops back up again, and yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's
what if
just
he just pops it back out?
right. Yeah, I was like wondering. I was like, is there gonna be like a post-credit scene where he just like shows up in like some other like he shows up in like the Guardians of the Galaxy or something like that. I could see
Yeah,
them
yeah.
doing something with that. But yeah, that is I think one of the major advantages of
Yeah.
this being based on a universe with so many decades of history that you can be like, yeah, we need somebody that we are never going to obviously use in like another Marvel property. We could just pull him out. We've got this guy called Doorman. We're never going to use
Yeah.
him, so we can just have him be this kind of tragic character that serves as backstory, but also a lot of ways a parallel. Like
Yeah.
the kind of dangers of getting like that 15 minutes of fame. I think I don't have his name in front of me, but the actor who plays him does a really fantastic job.
Byron Bowers.
Byron Bowers, yeah. He's very, very good in it, and so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
loved seeing that whole plot line, kind of develop, and it felt like with this once again being done by Cretton, obviously, as we mentioned, Yahya had been in multiple big superhero franchises before, and I'm glad that I've been waiting for him to show up in a Marvel one, so I'm glad he got here. But it feels like he's almost kind of commenting on, the road that Simu Liu had with Shang Chi, where Simu Liu
Oh, okay.
was really was a relative unknown. He was probably someone at the level that Simon Williams was at, where I think he was a day player. There was all those stuff where after he
Right.
got cast, it's like there was a meme about like all of the like bad headshots that, or not headshots, but like all the stock photos that he had done, and like they were kind of like circulating those. So I don't know. Did you think that there was any parallels between Simu Liu, the real life actor, and his journey, and the fictional journey of Simon Williams here?
I didn't follow any of the Simu kind of any of that, stuff around Shang-Chi coming out, or afterwards, or any. So I didn't draw any parallels, there. But I wouldn't be surprised, given that it's this the showrunner is the same guy who did that movie. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he was kind of using this as a outlet almost for like, hey, let's here's how this character or this actor, this his experience. So yeah, maybe we'll use some of that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, absolutely. Well, any other
not
thoughts
sure.
on the Doorman episode, which is such a like
No.
outlier? Yeah, no, I'm
Oh,
glad you brought it
yes,
up. Yeah, go
yes, I
ahead.
do. I was listening to the Weekly Planet, their
Oh, love that
latest
show.
episode, and they touched on the pretty much the whole run of Wonder Man, and I believe it was Nick Mason mentioned that Doorman got his powers somehow like the Roxxon Corporation,
Yeah,
who
I was gonna
is
maybe
like
bring up Roxxon because they kind of like just show up, especially in Marvel TV, as like kind of
yeah
these overarching bad guys slash things in the
yeah
background.
yeah, he mentioned that's where Doorman got his powers because he goes out to the trash and
It's like the dumpster says like Roxxon. I did pick
finds.
up on that.
Okay, I didn't catch that the dumpster had rocks on it, but that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. So I like that I'm glad to know that they did tie it all in, because when I watched it, like I said, I didn't notice that the trash can said rocks on, and then by the time it's all over, I'm like, how did he get his powers? Other
Yeah.
than like putting his fingers in some like weird, sludge that was in a dumpster. So yeah, that's a nice little Marvel kind of call like Easter egg there.
Yeah, I love that. I'm really glad you brought it up because Roxxon, they show up like there's, they'll be in the background of like a lot of these larger properties. Like I think there was like some, chemicals that showed up in the background of the last Captain America.
Yeah.
There's some tankers that
Well,
say
they
like
were
Roxxon in the first
they're
Iron
mentioned.
Man.
Yeah, they're mentioned in Iron Man 3.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
one of the things that the Mandarin says is like, because the president was like a former head of Roxxon or something, like
Oh,
he had
okay, yeah,
some connection with Roxxon. So it was like, yeah, it gets firmly name dropped in Iron Man 3 from the Mandarin. So
nice, yeah. But and like
yeah,
on the TV side too, especially with
yeah,
those like older shows, they were a
yeah.
lot more like at the forefront. Like the whole Cloak and Dagger deals with like a Roxxon like
Mm,
explosion, and like that's how those
yeah,
characters get their powers. And there's a whole thing when like
yeah,
I think it's the Defenders or Daredevil sees like the original run of
yeah,
Daredevil where like Roxxon. So when it's kind of like whenever you need bad corporation
Yep,
and
yep,
messing with superhero shit, like
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
convergence. So it was really nice to see that get
yeah,
referenced here.
for sure.
Yeah, but then we kind of get into the back half of the show. Now we have
Mm,
all that context from the Doorman episode. We know exactly the stakes for Simon because at first we didn't know like, oh, like he's a superhero, he's trying to keep it hidden. We didn't know that there could be dire consequences for that going out. But now with that
right.
context from that episode, the last batch of episodes have a little bit more weight to them when it comes to that.
Yeah. I saw something that kind of likened it to sort of the modern Sokovia Accords,
Mm.
in the MCU. It's like this is, but also like having to hide. It just parallels, what where comics kind of where the X-Men kind of got their start,
Hmm.
having to hide who you are, having to hide that you have powers, which is just a metaphor for, LGBTQ and like
Mm.
kind of all that stuff from the early days, struggles that people have had to, go through. And um so yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. That's nice. And but yeah, then next episode is episode 5, found footage, where they're kind of, he does almost get outed, as you were talking about, where there's like a kid who sees him
Yes.
like use
Yeah.
it, like he sees him with a GoPro after some heavies try to beat up Slattery for some old drug debts, and
Yeah.
they kind of
Yeah.
go on this little madcap adventure where they run through the suburbs, and and they end up at, like, it's one of those setups where they're like, oh, this is clearly not what it looks like. There's gonna be some kind of reversal here. They're like
Yeah.
making, and it ends up being like they're making like these tahine rings and stuff like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, I could go for one of those right now. Yeah, what did you think about that episode?
Um, it's a lot of fun upon rewatch and upon like thinking about it and making my notes. Like we just had, I guess the second episode, like I mentioned, is kind of a quest episode. The quest to do this self tape, and so this one is kind of a quest as well. It's like we've got to find the kid who was filming us. We got to go along with him to his nemesis's house, and then we got to go in there. Now we're wrapped up in all this, and then the cops come. Like it's all a bit like another sort of fetch quest kind of thing. And you could cut this episode out, if you wanted to shave this down. I mean, heck, if you wanted to make a movie out of it, you cut out the doorman episode and you cut out this episode, because
Yeah.
the only plot that gets advanced in this episode is like on the way to Esteban's house, they get an email with like the sides of the scene that they're about to go, or what they think is going to be the next day. And then when they get to to Esteban's house and the shit hits the fan, they get a call and it's like, oh, the audition is now moved up to today. So that's really the only plot development, in the overall show. But it is a fun episode as far as everything goes. But like it is, kind of just like it's, if you were looking for one to skip, you could probably skip this one.
Yeah.
But it is still fun, and absolutely love when Simon and Trevor are rocking up to Esteban's house, and they're like, how are we gonna play this? And Simon is full of confidence, and he's like, we're gonna play it like that episode I did of Law and Order, and he just name drops the director and like who wrote the episode, and he gives a little bit of background information about what the scene was, and then as soon as they ring the doorbell, the lady answers, and it all falls apart because the Mandarin of it all. Like she recognizes Trevor, and all of it falls apart. It's such a well timed, like, screwed again because of the Mandarin, because of Trevor's past. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do like what you're saying about like how this is a somewhat superfluous episode, but it's still really fun, and feels like it. Not a lot of plot happens, but you are continuing to build on that dynamic between the two of them, their interactions, them going on this other adventure, following these other characters around. And that is, another benefit of it being TV rather than a movie, is you can have a lot longer to develop these characters. And it does kind of feel like the episodes of TV that don't get made as much anymore, because, like we said, this is an 8-episode show. Back when TV was 22 episodes a season, you would get 10 of these in a season, where it's like, there's not that much happening, but, there's a lot going on with these characters, It feels like an episode of New Girl or something in that respect.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that we don't have to watch so much TV to get through a season, but I do miss that kind of thing sometimes, like even a plot-centric show like Lost from back in the day that still would have, like, for at least its early seasons, more episodes. You would have episodes like Hurley and Sawyer going on an adventure to try and get this VW bus that they found working, and that was such a good character episode, and that that is something I think really gets lost, is the importance of characters. If it's not driving constantly plot, the internet will be like, why did this episode exist? This is a plot hole here, blah blah blah. But these things are still important, I think.
I always used Smallville as the example of like, here's a series that went for, what was it, 10 seasons,
Yeah, yeah.
something like that. I was like, here's a series you could condense that whole show down to like 4 or 5 amazing seasons if you just kind of cut out a lot of the the soap opera
Yeah.
episodes and stuff
Mm.
like that. But then and now it's like we are getting condensed shows that are for the most part just solidly written, and it is a little bit like, man, I wish we had 22 episodes of this show and multiple seasons. And with this, like, I don't know, are we gonna get season 2? Is this kind of a standalone? Like, I don't know that we're gonna see Wonder Man, pop up in anything, but I really hope we do, you know. But
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what happens with a lot of these characters that have been introduced in these Marvel spotlights. If they're characters, because it's totally fine if they exist on their own. That's kind of the whole premise behind the banner for these things. But I'm like, are we gonna get Simon Williams gonna show up in something else?
yeah,
Are we gonna get Werewolf by Night? That character was so cool. I loved seeing him pop up.
yeah,
And so it's
yeah,
like things were like, yeah, who know? Like, I don't know what's gonna happen with these characters. Maybe they'll team up. Maybe they'll have some like B tier offshoot Avengers or something like that.
yeah.
I would really like these characters to reappear in some way. But if they don't,
Mhm.
I'm okay with it. What do you think we'll see them again? Because I mean, this has been so well received, and Abdul-Mateen has been so good, and like we said,
Right.
he's been great in other superhero properties, where they've either Watchmen obviously was like a one off and it ended, or the DCU kind of crash and burn, so we didn't get any
Sure.
more of his Black Manta character. It would be nice to see him be able to have a more recurring role in one of these things.
Yeah. Like I said, I really hope we see him again. I think Marvel would be, they'd be fools to let this actor and this character, slip through their fingers. So I
Yeah.
don't necessarily expect to see him like pop up in, Secret Wars or oh, what's the other one? Doomsday, but something like let's get him with in the next thing. I'd like to see him with some other superheroes.
Yeah, I mean, and I know Defenders gets ragged on a lot, but I quite liked it, and I liked that idea of like we slowly introduce these kind of
Oh,
more
for sure.
street level heroes. You got your Daredevils, your Jessica Jones, your Luke Cages, Iron Fist is there too, and like then they all get that kind
Yeah.
of cool crossover in the way that the Avengers did, but in a much more small scale. They're going up against give us another like bad guy like Sigourney Weaver or something
Absolutely.
for them to go
Yeah,
against.
yeah.
That would be really cool. But yeah, and then the next couple episodes,
Mm.
he, he gets the callback, has
Yeah.
those kind of interactions with all the other actors, and then of course gets the job, in the episode callback
Yeah.
and Kathy Friedman, and you are seeing him really like experiencing success. You are seeing
Yeah.
both him and Trevor kind of getting their dreams realized. And like, what did you think about these two episodes?
The episode 6 callback gives me so much anxiety because
Okay.
it's all about like nailing that second interview, and then he gets there and it's like, oh, you're gonna be with the other actors, and so he's instantly like thrown off his game. He found out that the whole day got bumped up a day, and so he wasn't prepared, and because of the little quest that they've just been on, he's not like rested. And then he gets in there and he just starts to blow it, and it's so like, oh my god, dude, like, get it together. So that one, it's a little uncomfortable to watch because it's so just nail biting.
Yeah, and as someone who has had callbacks when I was acting,
Yeah.
it's incredibly nerve wracking, especially when they're like, "Hey, just improv this thing," and it's not like, it's a little bit exaggerated, but like
Right.
it's not to be like when the director will just be like, "And you have no eyelashes," like I'm like, that's some shit that like
Yeah.
I could see like them throwing up like, "All right, here's the interview," like it's not that
Yeah.
far off from reality, honestly.
Okay. Yeah. I like the later one. He's like, and you have a dream that your mother cooked you a hedgehog. Like, okay.
He's like, "All right, man." Like, yeah, it's so funny because like so many actors and directors have such different processes, and
Yeah.
his process is so, you know, not exactly method, but like
Yeah.
he's like meticulous down to like I'm gonna do this one and then do this here and this here. Whereas when he
Yeah.
has to be a little more freeform, be a little meta, he just shuts down and starts quoting Pretty Woman.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, and
Yeah.
then the ones I will say the one scene of the show that kind of didn't work for me was when it's revealed to be a dream sequence where he punches the guy in the
Oh,
head. I
yeah.
kind of can't stand that like fake out where it's like, whoa, something
Okay.
crazy just happened and it's gonna like change the entire thing of the show. And I'm like, well, I don't know if I can still like Simon. He just murdered this guy, and it's like, no, it was
Yeah.
just a dream. Don't worry about it. I'm like, why is that even in here?
Right. I understand because then the next scene is him like, you know, I need a minute, and then he talks to Trevor, and can sort of lays it all out to Trevor like I am so scared that I'm going to reveal my secret, and I'm never going to be able to act again, and then um, Trevor turns that around and is like, no, you've got more to show them that you haven't, you need to show
Hmm.
and kind of gets through to him to like, you can open up without revealing your powers. And that's what he needs to do. And that's what, they then go in and nail the scene, and gives Von Kovac exactly what he's looking for, So that's a little like you've been failing this entire day, and then suddenly you're like, you
Hmm.
know, does it does it right and gets the job. So, it's all a little like,
Right, and that would be
works
it
out
would
a
be
little perfectly.
right, and
Yeah.
it'd be a lot longer of a more intensive casting process than you had the
Yeah.
first reading, and then you have one callback and it's down to three people, and then you get it that day for such a
Yeah.
huge level thing, especially with him being like a pretty unknown actor.
Right.
That was like one of those things that like stretches credibility, but it's like, you know
Mhm.
what, we have to keep the plot going, we have to get to the
Yeah.
next episode where now they're on the Wonder Man set. And
Right.
it also
And
sets
that
up like the we are, like you said, this is like we are nervous that it's going to get revealed, and with the Kathy
yeah.
Friedman of all in the next episode, that it does it well to kind of set up the stakes.
Yeah. In that episode I couldn't understand, or I couldn't like, I guess, wrap my head around the passage of time. Like, how much time has gone from, Von Kovac says, you've got the job. We'll be in talks. We'll talk soon. And then this next episode, he's been filming. He then talks to Janelle, his agent, and she says like, "Well, how was your first week of shooting?"
Mm.
So it's like, I don't know how much time has passed. Are we now, you know, if he got the job, how much time between then and, did he start? And this is now a week of shooting. So are we like 2 weeks in, from point A to point B? And the only reason I am thinking about that is because we have the B story. The clock is ticking on the damage control agent.
Mm.
He's like sweating Trevor of like, you need to give me this information, and Trevor did say like, well, you need to give me time to do it my way. So that does buy us some time, but I
Hmm.
have a hard time believing that this government agency is going to just sit back and like, okay, go film your show for a few weeks, or so it's like there's a ticking clock that's ticking slowly, but
Hmm.
I don't know how much time, like, where are we at in relation to where we just were. But
Right, that is
I
all
don't
a
know
little
if,
unclear, for
yeah.
sure.
And I think I only picked up on that maybe on the second viewing. So it's not a huge deal. Doesn't like, it's not a plot hole. Doesn't like break anything down. It's just like, yeah, it hit me like, like how much time has passed. But again, it doesn't really matter because, we're seeing what he is going through, with Kathy Friedman being around, and he's freaking out and thinking he's going to get exposed. And I love the way it twists at the end where she's more concerned about Trevor, and like, how did you, how did you get out of your prison sentence? And then that, of course, builds until it he has to confess to Simon, that I'm working for damage control and I've been spying on you.
Yeah, that is such
So
a powerful emotional end to the episode. And just to touch real fast on what you're saying about, because I did feel that same thing. It was kind of like the same thing with like the callbacks being so quick and everything, where it's like, okay, now we're in production. I do like, there's like a little throwaway line in one of these episodes about trying to get it into production so quickly because they want to avoid another writer strike, which I thought kind of alleviated that, and was also a nice, another, once again, meta reference, because this show was delayed because of the last writer strike. So I thought that was a nice little reference. But yeah, as you say, the Kathy Friedman episode builds to this, encounter that so much the show has been getting to, and it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how this is going to resolve between these two characters. And I don't want it to, the falling out I know is not going to be good, but I want these characters who clearly love each other to have a good relation. And when it comes to a head, how is that going to happen? And Trevor, is so kind of soft-spoken and kind about it, and he's just like, he says like, yeah, I was working, with damage control, I was giving them information, and he kind of storms out and has that big explosion, and that's the cliffhanger that then leads into what I think is a very fantastic final episode, where he's just kind of like hiding out. You think damage control is coming for him, and it perfectly pays off all the stuff that we've been talking about, where it's like, yeah, it's the Mandarin, excuse me, where he's like, yeah, he's the Mandarin, and he's trying to like escape from that, but he embraces it so that he can save his friend. He kind of, because he's been, the whole time he's just been like, yeah, don't want to go to jail, like, I'm going to do anything to avoid that. He takes responsibility. We get some more great Kingsley being, I'm the Mandarin once again. Like, that is such a good moment.
Time for another lesson.
Yes, and then you get, a little clip of Josh Gad there, which I thought was perfect. But yeah, that whole beginning is just so good. What did you think about the way that the last episode starts?
Yeah, I completely agree. This intro was the best, because you've got him freaking out that they're coming for him. It's almost like Goodfellas, where he's, when Henry is like driving frantically and he keeps looking up and seeing the helicopters, like, Karen, you killed us, Karen. It kind of has that vibe. And then he talks to Trevor, and Trevor's like, it's okay, I figured it all out. And this is when I clocked, what Trevor was about to do. And yeah, it's so beautiful that anytime someone makes a sacrifice to appear to be the bad guy in order to do the right thing, and it's sort of so perfectly summed up in The Dark Knight, like, he's not being the hero, he's being the bad guy, that sort of thing. And that's what Trevor does here. And like you said, he loves this guy, and he's willing to be the Mandarin again just to get the heat off of Simon. And it's so interesting because episode 3, episode 4, when we meet Doorman, I'm like, oh, okay, they're setting up the bad guy. Okay, great. By this point, I no longer care about, who is Simon going to fight? Who is he going to punch in this series? By this point, I am so invested in these two guys and their friendship and their journey together, that it's so perfect, so well done. And yeah, this just made me just fall in love with Ben Kingsley as Trevor, and these two guys. So
yeah, and we talked before about how this is a very different Marvel show, how it's not like, because even like Marvel will often do a thing where they're like, okay, we're doing a different genre here, we're doing like a heist movie, we're doing a sitcom thing, But, I know as much as I love all those properties, and I love that they are experimenting and doing stuff, like, at the end of WandaVision, she's still having a big battle in the sky. She's like, that always kind of is the way these things go by the last episode. So I'm like you, I'm like, wait, I didn't think it was necessarily going to be Doorman, but I was expecting him to be like, okay, well, now I'm Wonder Man, but I'm the real Wonder Man. I'm not just playing him, I'm going to take on this persona and be a superhero. And we never get that. It never becomes a superhero thing. It's always what it is. It stays true to itself, especially in this last episode. And he still utilizes his superpowers, but is not out here fighting a villain, saving the world, whatever. The ultimate ending of this show is him going back for his friend who has made this big sacrifice. Now he needs to go back for him. And I was like, after that happened, after the sacrifice, at the beginning where Slattery goes to jail, I'm like, what's going to happen next? We get that really great scene, which is once again a great meta commentary on the superhero genre, where he's like giving this emotional speech that is on one level really good, but it's also very funny because he's delivering it to a tennis ball. And yes, that's how these movies all go. But then it's like, it cuts forward to Yucca Valley, and I'm like,
we get the premiere. We find the other side of that scene. True. We get Joey Pants,
which is such a good payoff.
Oh yeah, I definitely wanted to get that in there.
No, and that's a great scene too. That whole sequence of the premiere and everything.
But then, I love that this one fast forwards. We have no idea how passage of time. So, like on the flip side, where last episode I'm like, what's the passage of time here? But here we clearly, like, we jump forward. Mm-hmm. The movie has come out. It did well, probably, and Simon Williams is a household name because these people, this family that he's now living with, are all like, what the hell is he doing here? So fun, and took me a minute to catch on to kind of what he's doing. I think it was by the time he was either working on the truck with him or jogging with him that I figured out, he's going in undercover. He's pretending to be, researching for a role, but he's really in trying to get close with one of the prison guards, at wherever they are holding Trevor. So.
Right, because you don't really know what's going on in that whole scene where he's like, it just seems like he's doing research for roles. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. What are they building to? They're out there in Yucca Valley, which is obviously another place in Southern California. So that I do know a little bit. It's like kind of like the desert out there, And so I'm just like, all right, what is
perfect place for a Supermax prison, probably.
Right, exactly. So I'm just like, what is
apparently this prison has shown up, I guess, in Ms. Marvel, maybe.
That checks out, because I'm like, I know there's like a couple. There's like this one. There's the raft. I know that they've been thrown around a little bit. Like there's a few of them, and like that's one of the things is like we've got this big new prison. We got to put people in it. That's like we've just got to meet these quotas. Is a recurring thing that happens in this show.
And I touched on it earlier when we were talking about Doorman. The second thing that once they started talking about this prison, I thought what they were going to do, was reveal that they were using Doorman to create a gateway. Like they've been experimenting on him and figuring out his powers. And like in the Marvel comics, Reed Richards developed he made a prison in the negative zone.
I know a little bit about this.
Back, I think, during the Civil War times. And so I kind of thought, okay, they're using this prison, but what they're really doing is using Doorman to create a gateway into the negative zone where they can put prisoners, and they'll never get out. So that's kind of like as soon as they showed as soon as I figured out that he's going to basically just try and do a prison break, I thought we were going to run into Doorman there for a kind of second appearance and find out what Damage Control was kind of doing, like experimenting on him to do that. But obviously they didn't do that, and that's totally okay.
I mean, because I'm watching this happen, and he's like studying for this role, and I'm just kind of like, where is this going? Because there's no real indication. Like he's like talking about shadowing him at work, and the guy talks about like, I have this bad job, but he never lets on what it is until he's like they're like driving to work, and then there's that kind of slow pan up to, and you see the prison, which I think has been shown here, like you said, like it got mentioned in Captain Marvel. So I was just like, and even if you don't know / remember, you're like, well, that's clearly some like big crazy superhero thing. And
they talk about it in the second episode. After they've arrested Trevor, I think they're having like a you know, damage control board, not boardroom, but a meeting. And the guy says, we've got this prison that, it cost a lot to build.
Yeah.
We need to fill it up with people.
Yeah.
And
that reveal was when I was kind of like, oh, okay. Like, I know what he's doing. He's like, because he's going to the prison. He's getting Trevor, and that breakout sequence is just so fun, and it's so great because it's one thing. It's like this whole thing started with Trevor being broken out, against his will in that one shot, and now he's getting broken out, by his buddy, and like their reunion is so nice, and he's just like, hey, get out of here. Like he's, now he's gone from being so selfish to now being very selfless, and the two of them just like flying off feels like an absolutely perfect end to this series. Like, what do you think about the last chunk of Wonder Man?
For whatever reason, I think because the callback episode 6, when he starts doing the Pretty Woman, we starts quoting that for whatever reason. When I see this finale, all I can think about is the end of Pretty Woman when Richard Gere like climbs a fire escape to, rescue Vivian. What's her name? Julia.
Oh, Julia Roberts. Yeah.
Roberts. So for whatever reason, now I watch that ending and I just think of like, oh, it's a romantic ending of, the knight in shining armor rescuing the damsel in distress from the castle. And that's kind of what they were going for in Pretty Woman. And it's just, so that for whatever reason, my brain made that connection.
Sure. Yeah.
But no, I really, I love the way it ends with, it basically sets up, it's Wonder Man Begins, now he's got his powers, he's mastered his powers, and I cannot wait to see what happens next with these two characters.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so excited to see, where this goes. He's got his suit now. I love the kind of recurring motif about the glasses, how he gets the actual glasses. The connection with his father, because it's a cool suit too. Like it looks great. It's gonna see. Well, it'd be cool to see if like he does show up in some superhero stuff. Hopefully, we get some more Trevor Slattery because he's always great in these kind of like supporting roles, showing up being a very good comic foil, but also a very interesting emotional character. So yeah, I mean, any last thoughts on Wonder Man here?
I wish we'd gotten just a little bit more of young Simon and the dad, or even just a little bit more of the family back then. Just one more scene of them or something. But I guess, what do you think about him getting his powers? They're clearly not doing a like, oh, he was in a accident and covered in, I've kind of forget his origin in the comics. I think he's basically just given powers by Baron Zemo or like some bad guy. But here it kind of seems like they're going the mutant route, where he just has always had these powers, or at least developed them probably at age whatever age he was at the kitchen fire. So I don't know, how do you feel about his powers, like him getting his powers?
Because I guess I was waiting for that flashback scene to happen where something traumatic happens in his childhood and he gets the powers. But like I said, he might just be immune, and I'm okay with like them never really addressing it, because it doesn't really matter. Like we know he has powers, and that he's different. Like he's being quote unquote, he's like that kind of metaphor for someone outside of society, like LGBTQ, or like a person of color or anything like that. Somebody who's not like accepted, as in by certain forces that be in the world. So I think that it doesn't really matter. And we've seen so many origins. We get another superhero origin in the middle of the show that I don't need it. And it kind of leaves that opportunity open for, like, if they, want to make him a mutant later on, then they can do that, Maybe he's an Inhuman, like we kind of forgot that there's like a whole batch of Inhumans that are like out there in the world because of like those old Marvel shows that are just existing that no one ever talks about anymore. So who knows?
Yeah, I mean, they've done 3 and soon they'll be doing a 4th Spider-Man movies, and we've never seen his origin. So, I think we don't need it. I'm okay if they want to make him a mutant. I think it'll be an easy catch-all for a lot of characters moving forward. But I think it'd be really hard to swallow if there was like that making the kitchen fire was like the biggest event in their past. But then and then there was also that accident that Simon was in where he was covered in toxic sludge, that would be, that's the only thing they would ever be talking about. So, I'm glad that they didn't try to say that he was somehow, got those powers in some fashion like that when he was young. So. Yeah.
And in a 22 episode season, we would have absolutely had a whole episode devoted to that. So, that's one of the benefits of the 8 is like, we don't need it. So it's fine.
Yeah. But no, I mean, that's all my thoughts on the show, I think.
Yeah, no. Like I said, just fantastic show. Super glad we got it. Really, hopefully with the success of this, people really, really enjoying it. It does give Marvel permission to start doing some different stuff like that, to start being like, okay, well, we've got, I think especially with it being on Disney Plus and not being a movie that needs to make $300 million or whatever, they're like, we can have something a little bit more small scale like this. So I'd like to see them experiment like this in the future, do another Werewolf by Night, which was like, hey, we've got this guy who scores all our movies and he wants to make movies, so he's going to make this weird old throwback to Universal monsters. Like, do more weird shit like this. So I'm all in, and I love this one and want to see more of this character and this style. Thank you again, man, for coming on. Before we go, wanted to have you mention Real Comic Heroes one more time and where anybody can find it.
Sure. First, I want to thank you, because I don't know when the buzz around this show may have made me watch it, but again, I wasn't like anticipating this one, so it wasn't until you messaged me about coming on, for this. So thank you for just kind of putting it, giving me a reason to just sit and start watching it.
I'm glad.
Clearly I fell in love with it and didn't want to stop watching it once I started. So
very nice.
So listeners can find me over on Real Comic Heroes. That's real with 2 E's. Real Comic Heroes. And like I said, we go through a big list of movies in release order. If you jump into the more recent stuff, I'm kind of on a hiatus right now, so a little few and far between, as far as my release of episodes lately. But we'll be hitting the list, pretty soon. So, big backlog of movies to check out over there. And then I do another podcast called Minute of Thieves, where I break down the 1991 Robin Hood Prince of Thieves 1 minute at a time. So
yeah, it's good stuff.
If that's something you're into, and Derek's been on that show. Have I gotten you on Real Comic Heroes yet?
Not yet. I would love to be on.
Okay. Yeah. I'll get you on soon then.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Very cool. I always have a lot of fun podcasting with you. And
likewise.
Thank you. And so definitely everybody check those out. And then you can also check out some other stuff that I do. Of course, my main show that I do is Underrated. So if you look up Underrated Movie Podcast or go to underratedmoviepodcast.com, you can find all that stuff there. There's a whole backlog of episodes of that as well. That's out every other Monday. On every other Friday, I do another just kind of more what's been coming out recently movie news show called Midnight Film Society. And then I have a Patreon as well. where I do different things every year. This year, it's going to be a show called Amadeus. So that first episode is already out on the Patreon feed, which you were my guest on. We talked about the first 15 minutes of Amadeus. That was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, so if you want to go, you can. If you want to sign up for as little as $1, you can get episodes of Underrated early and ad-free. There's also bonus episodes for that price of this show on there, including we did 3 at the kind of end of the year of 2025. And then there'll be new episodes dropping for Amadeus all over the course of 2026. And, of course, always new episodes of Underrated. So, yeah, love for you guys to check any and all of that out, or just give this show a like or a 5-star rating, however you're listening to it, whatever your options are there. It means a lot. And then I'll see, well, until the next Marvel Things comes out, I'll see you guys all next time.